all of you this evening and to be able to share with you some thoughts from the Scriptures. If you have your Bible handy, I'd like for you to turn Amos chapter 3, verse 8. As far as the book that you're studying, the Revelation book, I would suggest that you stay 3 or 4 studies ahead. Study ahead in the book so that you'll have it studied if something happens, because you can prayerfully think about it. And also pay close attention to the illustrations. As the brother mentioned, it was primarily for the anointed, but in this book it highlights the point we're now living in the great crowd era. Just to give you an example, on the front page there, you'll notice the horses there with crowns. That would picture the anointed taking the lead. But later on in the book, you'll see horses without crowns. That pictures the anointed doing the same work now. So it's good to keep this book in mind. It's 2 books in one. Identifying Jehovah's confidential servant. If we can identify his confidential servant today, what would you be willing to do? What would this mean to us? Would we have to do anything? Would anything be required of us? Will it cost us anything? At Amos chapter 3, verse 7, says, "For the sovereign Lord Jehovah will not do a thing unless he has revealed his confidential matter to his servants, the prophets." So here the John class is being used by Jehovah to unlock the book of Revelation. That's why it's important to know who the John class is and what relation it bears to that effect. So there it speaks of a confidential servant. So Jehovah won't do a thing unless he reveals it to his confidential servant. Jehovah is always warned of the coming judgments. He warned Noah of the coming of the flood, Abraham and Lot of the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, Jonah of the destruction of Nineveh, and that's just in your Bible reading this week. You want to read that. Amos of the downfall of Syria, Philistia, Tyre, Edom, Ammon, Moab, Judah, and Israel. And it's interesting how other prophets told in detail about the situation with the chosen ones, chosen nation, as they would be taken into captivity and released. And in every case, these things were startlingly executed and carried out. And also, Christ's coming was foretold from Genesis to Malachi, and equally plain of fulfillment is what we're talking about today, the end of this system of things, and it daily comes near on the earth today. But now let's talk about this faithful and discreet slave a little bit. Some things that confidential servant would have to have. Turn with me to Daniel chapter 2:28. At Daniel 2:28, it speaks of this confidential servant. And Daniel makes an interesting point here about Jehovah. "However, there exists a God in the heavens who is a revealer of secrets." Now, perhaps you've heard people say, or maybe you've had a friend, best friend, confidential friend, and you could tell your best friend a secret and you told him, "Don't tell anybody." That's not the way Jehovah works. Jehovah tells a secret to his confidential servant, and he wants them to tell it. So that helps you to see who Jehovah is using. We know that Jehovah is using this one because he's revealed something to them. Now let's go to Daniel chapter 9, verse 22. Daniel 9:22. "And he proceeded to impart understanding and speak with me and say, O Daniel, now I have come forth to make you have insight with understanding." So Daniel had that insight, not just knowledge of the Bible, not being able to quote certain things from Moses, but he had insight as to what was happening, what Jehovah's purpose was. So today, we would also want to have that same insight with understanding. Perhaps I could use an illustration to help you. People in the world, when you talk to them from door to door, they agree with you times are bad, won't they? And some of them tell me how bad it is before I even get a chance to ask. So they are aware of the badness of the situation, but they're not aware of the significance of those things. To carry that a little further, you're aware that you're in the Kingdom Hall. A person could be aware that he's in the Kingdom Hall, but is he aware of the significance of this building, the purpose of this building? Person may be aware that he's at the Circuit Assembly this weekend, but is he aware of the purpose of that building and that particular meeting? Let's go to the 25th Psalm, verse 14. Psalm 25:14 shows something else required of this confidential servant, and he must have this. Psalm 25:14. The intimacy with Jehovah belongs to those fearful of him. Also his covenant to cause them to know it. So you would have to have the proper fear of Jehovah to be able to understand these things. Now at our Circuit Assembly, that's the theme, rendering sacred service to God with godly fear. So rendering sacred service with godly fear. So when that Circuit Assembly is finished, that theme will be uppermost in your mind. Let's go now to Revelation chapter 10, verse 7, and see again that Jehovah is a revealer of secrets. Revelation 10:7. But in the days of the sounding of the seventh angel, when he's about to blow his trumpet, the sacred secret of God, according to the good news which he declared to his own slaves, the prophets, is indeed brought to a finish. Now, in this particular publication, it helps us to see what that point is. On this good news, Revelation chapter 10, verse 7. And it seemed to me that whenever you're studying the book of Revelation now, you would always want, whenever you see something mentioned in Revelation, why not go to the book of Revelation and see what it has to say? This particular book here, on page 157, no delay any longer. How those words appeal to the aging John class today. In what respect is there no delay? Well, Jehovah's time is here for bringing his sacred secret to its happy climax with glorious success. So why should you make a detailed, personal, serious study of this book? Because it's telling us of our immediate future. It's showing us how we can survive. If we're really serious about the truth, we're going to study this in great detail. And of course, if we don't, we won't be able to blame Jehovah. You'll see in the beginning, Christ Jesus standing at the door knocking, Revelation 3:20. He said, I'm standing at the door knocking, and if you'll open up, I'll come in. In other words, he didn't say, I'll break the door down and force the truth on you. No. It's an invitation. And incidentally, in this front cover here, there's 5 pictures, and these 5 pictures tell you what's in the first half of this book of Revelation, and then the last half tells you what's in the last half of this particular book. And all these illustrations have meaning. For instance, in the back page, it's the first time we have made a detailed study of New Jerusalem, the business or the office complex of the 144,000. So you might say, well, I studied it before, but you didn't get all this. And as the book mentioned at the beginning, it could very well be that when we studied the other books, it was detailed, and if we're not careful, we could be missing some of the points. And I noticed the brother had the other books up here with him, didn't get a chance to use them or refer to them. Well, now, if Jehovah were to tell us the secret today, what would we do or what should we do? Let's go back to Amos chapter 3, verse 8. What should we do if Jehovah told us a secret today? Remember, your best friend might say, don't tell anyone. But now, here is what Jehovah tells us. At Amos 3, verse 8. There is a lion that has roared. Who will not be afraid? The sovereign Lord Jehovah himself has spoken. Who will not prophesy? Just to give you a little example, when you came in this evening from outside and you heard a lion roar, I don't know if you ever heard one roar, it shakes the ground. If you heard a lion roar out there, would you have come in and sat down calmly in the Kingdom Hall? not said a word, act as if nothing happened. And tonight when we leave, we send Brother Erskine out first. Or would we as come in? I know what I would have said. There's a lion out there. Maybe louder. And if Brother Erskine was to go first, I said, don't go first, Brother Erskine. Let's see what's out there. Well, that's what the Bible is saying. You've learned something. Jehovah's given a secret. Now, what are we going to do about these secrets? At Matthew 24, let's start zeroing in on some important points here. Matthew 24, verse 15 through 16. Therefore, when you catch sight of the disgusting thing that causes desolation as spoken of through Daniel the prophet, standing in a holy place, let the reader use discernment. Then let those in Judea begin fleeing to the mountains. Do you know what that disgusting thing is? When it arrives? Jesus says when you catch sight of it, that's the time to start fleeing. But if you don't know what it is and what picture and purpose it plays in our life today, how could you flee? And in the 16th verse, it says, begin fleeing. Begin indicates there's a beginning and there's also an end. So here we are, smack dab towards the end. Now, maybe I can have some help in the audience as to what it means to flee. Who could tell me what it means to flee? Brother back there and then the sister up here. Hold your hand up, brother.
To run and to get out of the place and hurry.
Okay.
Yeah, you would actually flee for your life. Most of the time you'd run without looking back. You'd just be so concerned about saving your life you wouldn't care what was behind you.
You'd be moving. Okay. I'll tell you what happened at the Assembly Hall one day and help you get a picture. It's a beautiful place we have there at the Assembly Hall, isn't it? But you're aware of the fact we're smack dab up against the Everglades. We're surrounded by water. When you're surrounded by water in Everglades, you're going to get animals and also those little slithering things, snakes. There was a brother at the Assembly Hall. He wasn't feeling too good. He had a cane and he was limping. And he said to me, I'm going outside to get some air. He wanted to get some fresh air. And he went out for a little walk. Then I saw him moving towards the Assembly Hall. I call it fleeing because that cane wasn't even touching the ground. Wasn't even hitting the ground. I said, what's the matter? What's the matter? He said, there's a snake out there. I went and looked at it. Sure enough, there was a snake. But he was picking them up and putting them down, wasn't he? Now, that's what Jesus said. When you catch sight of this disgusting thing, you're to flee. Not hang around in the old world or just tokenly do something, but you start moving. And that's obviously what is necessary. Now, let's go to Revelation chapter 17. Revelation chapter 17, verse 3. Revelation 17:3 reads, And he carried me away in the power of the Spirit into a wilderness, and I caught sight of a woman sitting upon a scarlet-colored wild beast that was full of blasphemous names, that had 7 heads and 10 horns. And verse 8, The wild beast that you saw was, but is not, and yet is about to ascend out of the abyss, and it is to go off into destruction. And when they see how the wild beast was, but is not, and yet will be present, those who dwell on the earth will wonder admiringly, but their names have not been written upon the scroll of life from the founding of the world. And verses 10 and 11, And there are 7 kings, 5 have fallen, 1 is, the other is not yet arrived. But when he does arrive, he must remain a short while. And the wild beast that was, but is not, it is also itself an 8th king, but springs from the 7 and goes off into destruction. Now in verse 10, that helps us to see where we are living in the stream of time. You, of course, can go to your Revelation book if you wanted to and find that. It may no doubt helpful to you to do that. But in this Revelation book, it tells us many things. But now in verse 10, it said there are 7 kings, 5 have fallen. Who could tell me the 5 kings that had fallen? Brother in the back there?
Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia and Greece.
Correct. And he said, one is. Who was the one that is? Sister Outlaw. Rome. So now you see, John here was being revealed where we're living in the stream of time. And of course the other one is not yet. Well, that would be the Anglo-American world power. So here we are. We can tell where we're living in the stream of time. Smack dab up against the end of this system. I'm going to use an illustration at the circuit assembly. I'll use it tonight. Repetition is the mother of retention, so it won't hurt. I stayed at a brother's home, as traveling overseers do, and he had an hourglass. And he told me, if you turn this hourglass upside down, it takes a whole hour for the sand to flow through. It's dry sand. And when you first turn it over, did you notice how slow the sand appears to go? It's real slow. But when it gets towards the end, what happens? It gets faster and faster. Well, I didn't want to stand there for an hour watching it. I set my watch and did something else. I came back and I thought I'd like to see the last bit of sand go through that narrow piece. And so I watched it, and I noticed that the closer it got to the end, the faster it got, faster, and whoop, I missed it. Oops, I wasn't paying attention. So I decided to turn it back up. Set my watch again, and this time I glued his great big old brown eyes right on that thing. And I watched, and same as the first, it started slow, but at the end it was getting faster, and whoop, I missed it, even though I had both eyes glued right on. I could not see that last grain of sand going down. 6,000 years ago, Satan turned this world upside down. Might have seemed slow to some of them, but you notice how things are happening so fast today? Listening to the news, the different happenings are happening so fast today that you can realize that with this publication, we're right on target. What the society has shown us in this publication shows us that the governing body is right on target. That's another reason to make a detailed study of this particular publication. Well, let's go to this particular book. You got your books with you tonight. Might as well turn with me to page 246. Page 246. This is from September 18 to 20, 1942, at the height of World War II. Jehovah's Witnesses, United States, held their New World Theocratic Assembly. The key city, Cleveland, Ohio, was tied in by telephone with more than 50 other congregations. 129,699 attended. But the key point was, peace can at last. That was the public talk that was given. Were any of you at that convention? Either Cleveland, one, two sisters, Tompkin, Beth Tompkin, my wife, another brother over there. Four of you were out there. So you know this really was part of our history. Brother Knorr gives a talk, Peace Can at Last. Said aroused much curiosity. How could the new president of the Watchtower Society, N.H. Knorr, presume to talk about peace when the very opposite seemed to be in store for the nations? The reason was the John class was paying more than the usual attention. And verse 4 gives us some information. Verse 5, paragraph 5, the wild beast speaks about the League of Nations, and then it comes out of the abyss again as German, and it comes out as United Nations. But when Japan, Germany, this since 1939, come back. This peace beast will come back. Well, that's interesting, because in 1942, what did it look like? And even though that talk was given in 1942, you think that material was just provided in 1942? It was obviously provided much, much earlier. And the world situation looked pretty bad at that time. We were in the midst of a World War II. Most of you here weren't even born, but those of us who were living through that. There was the Axis powers and the Allied powers. The Allied powers were Great Britain, France, United States, Russia, China, and country after country was being overrun by the Axis powers, Germany, Italy, and Japan. And in this particular book here, it shows the neutral brothers being put in prison and concentration camps. So it looked bad, because the Allied powers were losing, and yet here we said there's going to be a period of peace, and we even said that Germany is going to lose the war, that the Allied powers were going to win, because we knew a secret. The secret was that the earth was going to open up, the democratic part of the earth, and swallow this totalitarian beast for a purpose. so that there would be a period of peace for a purpose. And we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. I met a young lady in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. She wanted to know how her grandmother in World War II knew that Germany was going to lose the war and the Allied powers were going to win. Because her grandmother, now imagine this, it took courage for a woman. It takes courage to even preach in a country like that under those circumstances. But to say that Germany is going to lose the war, the Allied powers were going to win, well, she must have known Jehovah's confidential servant, right? And anyway, this little girl in Montreal learns the truth as well. So now, we told those things didn't happen. Now, the League of Nations, we said, is going to come back, and there's going to be a period of peace. You might say, well, anybody can say that. This is 1988. It's easy to look back and tell about these things, right? But this book was printed, and it was distributed in 88, but it was printed earlier. And interestingly enough, the information prepared in this book was before the recent happenings in Russia and other places in class notes. So as a result, our pages 134 to 137 are quite interesting, showing the governing bodies right on target on this particular book. Now I have a book that you don't have. It's in your library. I actually forgot mine tonight. I guess I'm getting old-timer's disease. The Truth Shall Make You Free. The reason I'm using this is that my Peace Can At Last booklet was so worn out, I had to retire it. But now, that talk in 1942 couldn't have been prepared in 42. The information was prepared in 41 and checked over, and the same with this information prior. I don't know if any of you have ever been given an article to work on, or the society asks you to write. What they do is they send us an article or a subject. They'll give you references to use, then they'll give you a time period, and you have to send it in by that time. So now when I send in, then they check the spelling, the grammar, the scriptures, see how accurate you are, and if there's something that needs to be verified, that's corresponded. Then finally, when it's in its completeness, ready to be composed, they write it, they send it back to you and say, is this what you intended to say? You write back, yes, only better than what I could have said it. So you realize there's a lot of work that goes in to preparing an article. It just doesn't somebody say, let's write an article. No, there's a lot of thought. And you can appreciate it as a discreet slave. So this book here was printed in distributed in 1943 at the conventions, and some of you must have studied. How many studied this book? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I got a few more this time. So we studied this book in the congregation book shed, just like you did the book of Revelation. When you got to page 336, it says, the sight of the abomination of desolation standing contrary to divine law in the place that is holy or set apart for God's righteous government is a sign. Jesus said, a sign that the great tribulation is dangerously near. It is a signal to flee with the utmost haste out of the danger zone. In the January 1st, 1921 issue of the Watchtower, the League of Nations was pointed out as both the image of the beast and the abomination that make it desolate. So we identified it as way back in 1921. So that was the time to begin what? To begin to flee. So this must be the time pretty close to the end of that fleeing. So we can't drag our feet. It goes on to show that they fled to the Theocratic Mountain. But on page 337, it mentioned that the Vatican would not be in favor of the League of Nations because they couldn't get on its back and write it, and therefore they didn't support it, and the totalitarian powers began to rise. However, when we said that this beast is going to come back, when did it come back? In October 1945 in San Francisco, California, at one of the high schools there, the nations met, and then finally when Russia ratified her treaty and deposited, the United Nations now come into existence in 1945. They first held their meeting in Switzerland, and then later, of course, you know where it is now in New York City. And to show the continuity, the League of Nations eventually turned over all their property, money, whatever they had to the United Nations, showing the continuity there. But This was before it all happened, right? I've never seen or heard any other organization say the League of Nations was going to come back, or that organization was going to come back. But we did. On page 338, even uses the word United Nations. They would have an international police force proposed to safeguard the peace and enforce the decrees. Has the United Nations had any police force? Now maybe we can get some thoughts from the audience. Has the United Nations had any police force? Brother over here. I forgot your name. You went to Pioneer School.
Yes, of course, we hear about the policing action by the UN forces that are involved in various conflicts around the world.
Yes. So, Brother Tompkin.
Well, there's a force right now in southern Lebanon. There's a buffer between the Israelis and the Lebanese. Syrian. There's another one in Egypt that's patrolling, keeping peace between the Israelis and the Egyptians.
Okay. And Brother Wright, all right, go ahead.
On the news, you can see them riding around in their little trucks. They even have a national symbol, a flag, that they use to police the area what they try to go between.
Good. Right there by you.
The first major use of the United Nations police force was in the Korean War.
Right on. Sister Scallioni. That was in the 50s.
Well, excuse me, the war that ended between the Iraqians and Iranians, they have a United Nations trying to keep the peace there.
Yes. And you see the little trucks riding around. It's a country in Africa right now. You see their brother? Namibia, correct. We're also in the Congo and the Cyprus. I do have in my possession a first day letter. Anybody know what a first day letter is? First day cover? No philatelists here? Stamp collectors? Brother in the back there.
When a stamp is issued the first day, they have a special commemorative envelope and they postmark it with that date, the date the stamp is issued.
Yes, commemorating a place or event. And there's one on the Cyprus peacekeeping forces in Cyprus, all verifying what we just said. And we realized then that here's somebody that said it long before it happened. Anybody can tell you afterwards, right? But having been Catholic, I like a couple of points here I'm going to bring out. Page 339. The peace and security beast that sends out of the abyss, but not to freedom. For a blood-drunk woman gets on a beast's back. Who is that blood-drunk woman? Sister Tompkin?
Well, at that time, it was thought to be the Catholic Church.
Okay. And who is it now? She's correct. She's absolutely right, Sister. Babylon the Great. And who is the principal part of Babylon the Great, brother?
That is Christendom.
And who's the principal part of Christendom, Sister Tompkin? The Catholic Church. It's in print here. And can you tell me what religion only has addressed the United Nations? There's only one religion that's addressed the United Nations, given a talk. Sister in green here. Yes. Catholic religion with the Pope. Can you name the popes? There's two popes, a small fella and the present one, young brother here. John Paul. First was Paul and John Paul. Okay. Now, I was in New York City at the time. I was a circuit servant. I was with that brother back over there in Bensonhurst. In New York City, when the Pope addressed the United Nations, he did not do it at the building. He did it at Yankee Stadium for some reason. And I can recall when I came home from service this one evening, turned on the newscast, the Pope was standing at the home plate with outstretched arms saying to the United Nations, "We come as your friend." Uh-oh, we've got a problem. The Bible says a friend of the world is what? And he can't be that confidential servant then, can he? If he's an enemy of God. I haven't heard any other religion that's told me the things. And of course, the recent Pope has addressed the United Nations right in the building. Well, with this information, it's published by the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society. And what else do we call these people that work from door to door? So who is Jehovah's confidential servant today? 2 words. Sister over here.
The anointed servant of Jehovah today.
Okay, but they're not the only ones I see going door to door. And brother over here, you're correct. We'll enlarge on that.
So it would be Jehovah's Witnesses.
So now, who's God's confidential servant today? Let me hear it. That's right. I haven't heard anybody else. The enemies don't talk about this book. They don't want you to read it. Wonder why. You know why, don't you? So with this book here today, if you're really serious about the truth, friends, your survival is at stake. We're close. I mentioned to you about page, let's turn to that page, 134 to 136. You'll see Revelation chapter 8, verse 8 and 9 used, that picture there, the burning mountain thrown in the burning sea. What is that picture? This is vision number 5, the mountain's on fire, going to the fire sea. It pictures unstable governments. Paragraph 24, you see, it mentions how God's kingdom is portrayed as a mountain, and Jeremiah 51:25, ruinous Babylon became a burned out mountain. And the things that it's mentioning, it shows how human government becomes a burning issue, and it shows how countries like in Russia, China, and others are undergoing movement. And this was printed before the recent happenings in Russia. I don't know about you, but that's thrilling to me. That tells me the governing body is right on with this one. We're right on target. And you know why? It's time for Jesus Christ to make this known worldwide. And this book is by means of pictures to help people learn the truth. We have millions of people throughout the world, even brothers, who cannot read, you see. And because of that, there are pictures that are used that help to get the point. We can teach people enough from the truth from this book with pictures that they can survive. I'll see if I can pick out a picture here for you. I like this one on page 114. Page 114, paragraph 4. There's a new point there. It's a new thought to us. No doubt these 4 angels represent 4 angelic groups. Not 4 angels, but 4 angelic groups. And you notice the clouds there, it's holding back. And the 3 up the top there are no doubt holding back the north wind, and 1 to the right, the east wind, because you can see Russia down there at the bottom, Europe, in that particular part. On page 121, you see the part we were talking about, the great crowd era. And isn't that a beautiful picture there? That pictures the great crowd era. Now you notice the great crowd are pictured as clean shaven. And the reason for that, of course, is that that's the custom for the day, although the brother to the right does have a mustache. Now you will notice that Jesus has a beard, like on page 26. On page 26, and you were talking about the lampstands, you see Christ Jesus with a beard there. And what is that picture? The Insight book helps us to see what this means. Whenever the angels appeared to men on earth, it meant was urgent, prominent, something that had to be acted on right away. So with Jesus Christ appearing with a beard of dignity and wisdom, it shows the information we're getting now needs to be acted on. That's why paragraph mentioned, if we thoroughly study it. Of course, you see John prostrate there, and then you see a picture of the anointed. They're all pictured as older ones, gray-haired. And you see Jesus in the midst of the 7 lampstands, which indicates that he's safeguarding or actually inspecting our congregations. And I like this one on page 28 and 29 about Brother Erskine. This proves he's doing the right thing. See those congregations we were talking about there? They're all in a circuit. See, Brother Erskine does the same thing, so we're on the right direction there. On page 75, you see a picture of the throne of Jehovah, and it's a hazy one, but now you see the cherubs around there, you see the 24 elders, and you see the 7 bowls of fire. If you go over to paragraph 16, to the right, lamps of fire in the glassy sea, what does John further see? This, and there are 7 lamps of fire burning, 7 spirits. So this certainly defeats the ridiculous theory of Trinity. They're going to say 3. Then what about these 7 spirits? Not just 1 spirit. So you might be able to use that from door to door as well. And on page 83, you'll see the scroll being used there. And how does it work? See, we'll scroll number 1, the first red one, that's the little seal of clay, wax. That's the white horse. The second one, the red horse. So as each one opens, you get understanding. It keeps on opening up until we are at the end. And I don't know, you could take this particular book and keep learning and learning so many things about it. It's interesting. We pictured, let's see, on the front part of the page, the front part here, you notice about the 4 horsemen. One time, some of the brothers thought there were 5, but the society here chooses to use the bugaboo man as the 5th one, gathering in all the people killed by the others. And what a book you've got. It's 2 books in one, and because of these 2 books in one, it helps you to see and teaches the truth. And here now, of course, on page 315, when it said illustrations, they meant it, didn't they? Now just think of this. The governing body has worked hard, really hard, with the artist department. I can recall when they brought a brother, Richard Abrahamson, from Denmark, put him in a writing department, I'm putting him over in the art department. I said, Dick's a personal friend of mine. Dick can't draw, he doesn't know anything about drawing. Then he does know spiritual things, so you see it fit in as to what was happening. Here is the detailed study of an enlargement of the gate. It takes us around a corner, and it's an important study of the office complex of the United. On page 306, you see the other one. It's another view of the office complex of the 144,000. There's great organizational activity going on, and I don't know about you, it's exciting to read this book and to have it in your possession. So you're the winner if you will take the time to read it and study it and carefully go over it. You're the loser if you do it casually. And if you come to the Kingdom Hall or the book study and think, well, I'll get it as the brother reads it, no, you won't. You won't thoroughly get it. But now what are we supposed to do with the things we've learned or heard? 1 Corinthians 9:16, it mentions, 1 Corinthians 9:16, if now I am declaring the good news, it is no reason for me to boast, for necessity is laid upon me. It really woes me if I did not declare the good news. Acts 4:20. Notice again what we're going to do and supposed to do. Acts chapter 4, verse 20. But as for us, we cannot stop speaking about the things we have seen and heard. So with that thought in mind, we announce our meetings for field service Wednesday and Thursday morning. Will you be here Friday, Brother Erskine? Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday morning at 9 o'clock. And then Wednesday and Thursday afternoon at 1:15. And Friday afternoon, we give you girls off to do whatever girls do to get ready for assemblies. You do something, because sometimes I can't recognize you. You're always prettier. We men are pretty well limited as to what we can do. The theme of the assembly is rendering sacred service with godly fear. And there's a little change in the timing. We start at 9:55 both Saturday and Sunday. We don't have as long an intermission. We gather back at 1:30, so it means you want to be back in your seats at 1:25. And there's difficulty here, the announcements in the hallway, so be conscious of getting to your seats on time. And there's an important part in the afternoon where Brother Bridges has a congregation. He pantomimes a congregation coming in, and there's 2 things he's going to highlight. One, what does it mean, or how does the society feel about coming late to meetings? And 2, what's the viewpoint of chewing gum in meetings from door to door? Some of you older ones, when you were in school, what did they do to you when they caught you chewing gum in school? Can you tell me, brother here? And Brother Stanley?
They used to make us stick it in our nose.
Yeah. Brother Stanley?
They used to hit you with a stick when I went to school.
Yes. And they made you stick it on your nose, and sometimes made you even go from classroom to classroom. You see, it was considered, and still considered, bad manners. You say, well, they do it in school now. Well, they do a lot of things in school now. They take drugs, alcohol, smoke, fornicate. They do all those things in school. You want to deteriorate with their manners or be raised up from their manners, you see. And then the last talk on Saturday is closing the gap between knowing and doing. The governing body made the comment that this probably is the key point or highlight of the whole assembly. And they wanted the brothers to be sure to be there and bring their children with them, because we are going to talk about something very important with our young ones. And Sunday morning, Brother Morris has a very interesting part that deals with cleanliness. There's 4 areas of cleanliness. And it's something interesting to think about. In 1 year's time now, we're going to have the same information 4 times. We had it at a district convention, we had it at the Watchtower study, and we had it in the service meeting, and now we're getting it at the circuit assembly. I don't know about you, but if the governing body sees necessary to deal with 1 point 4 times in 1 year, I would pay more than the usual attention to that information, wouldn't you? It is my privilege to give the public talk on why fear the true God, and I know that you will enjoy the program. Who's been to the assembly so far? I hear a cliche every once in a while, best yet, and I don't like to use it, but I really believe it, friends. This is one of the best yet. And I'm surprised at the new ones that have come and have joined the program. But the brothers people won't come from here. That's too far, isn't it? Isn't it too far from here? Well, let's turn to Revelation 22:17, our last scripture. And I'm going to read it, leave out one word, and you're supposed to fill in the word I leave out. But real loud so I can hear. Okay? Revelation 22:17. And the Spirit and the bride keep on saying, you better say it louder. And let anyone hearing say, and let anyone thirsting, let anyone that wishes take life's water free. How many want us to come? Well, it's Jehovah's Spirit, Jehovah God, Christ Jesus, and the bride. How many make up the bride? 144,000. And everybody that's thirsting or hearing, saying, come. With all those people wanting us to come, how could we stay away? And you notice that point there? It says, anyone thirsting, come. I know of someone last week who's known the truth for a long time, but they did not show up at the assembly. But I can almost hear what they're going to say at the Great Tribulation. I wasn't told about this. Jehovah's going to say, you weren't thirsty either. Because if you were thirsty, you'd have been there. So Jesus said that's the main point. Happy are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Did I get all the announcements, Brother Erskine? I got all the announcements? I win a box of cookies or something for that?